Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award-winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
Okay, before you go, Peadar, we have spoken intensively this week, and I'm not too sure if we're the only radio station that actually did it, but we spoke intensively about the laws and the new hate crime laws in Ireland. And one of the, 14 people objected and put in an objection the other day in the vote in the Dáil. You were one of those people. It was quite easy for us to get one or two people on, including yourself, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, who disagreed with it, but to get people on who agreed with it, who actually understood it, was extremely difficult, and still to this day. But what I wanted you to have a quick listen to before I ask you a couple of questions in relation to it is, Leo Varadkar was asked by Ben Scallon from Grip Media today about, the percentage of people in the country in the when they basically reached out to the people to ask them what they thought of this, and he had painstakingly gone through objections to it. 70% of the people who had objected to this. But have a quick listen to what he said.
Sure.
Taoiseach, your government conducted a public consultation regarding hate speech laws where citizens were asked to give their thoughts on the issue, and out of the thousands of responses from private individuals, over 70% were not supportive of such laws, and yet you're proceeding with them anyway. So my question is, why did your government bother to do a public consultation if you were just going to ignore the results?
Well, we do public consultations because we think they're good practice. It's a way to find out what people's thoughts are on issues, and it's also a way to flesh out and highlight some of the issues that we may not have considered. But we're also wise to the fact that the vast majority of people don't make submissions to public consultations. We have to bear that in mind. It's only a small portion of the population that participate in these things, so it's not necessarily reflective of public opinion. And also we're wise to the fact that very often submissions are organised and campaign groups will organise responses, so we're clear with that too.
But why hold the consultation if the end result is just going to be disregarded on the basis that it's not representative of public opinion? What's the point of it then?
Well, the point is that we're a democracy, and in Ireland we have elections, and decisions are made by the government and the elected parliament. They're not made on foot of public consultations or opinion polls. That's not what they're about. They're about testing the temperature.
So is it just for show then?
No.
Now, obviously, Leo was put in a very awkward situation there, but I think Ben had a really good point. What's the point of public consultation if you're actually not going to listen to the people? And then the suggestion by Leo Varadkar that we live in a democracy, but yet the decisions are made by politicians and it doesn't matter what people think. You objected to the laws. Why did you object to the laws?
Yeah, this is a very serious law that has been implemented this week, and actually it has passed with very little public media comment other than organisations such as yourselves. And actually it's been amazing to see so many international news outlets focus in on this law, given the fact that so little of the Irish media have focused in on it. In Aintree we're very clear that democracy is about the competition of ideas, that people should be able to make arguments and put cross points so that we can find out what are the best way to proceed with rules. Unfortunately, I believe Ireland is becoming a far more authoritarian type country. So what we're seeing is a chilling effect being created in terms of people being able to articulate views. And I think this particular piece of legislation will add to that. It'll silence people who want to be able to articulate
the argument
views.
from the state is that these are to protect people with protected characteristics, including race, colour, nationality, gender identification, sex characteristics, sexual orientation, and disability, and ethnic origin. So the argument is it's to protect minorities, I suppose.
Well, first of all, I do want to protect minorities, and I'm opposed to hate speech, but the point I'm saying is, if once you start to censor people's language, what happens is two things. One, you stop that competition of ideas, and two, you infantilize people, because after a while you say, well, other adults, we shouldn't have to listen to things because it infantilizes them by protecting them from language. We do need to have discourse. We do need to have discussion. We should be keeping it respectful. But, the problem is, the idea that some people in the state can decide whose speech is disrespectful and whose speech should be banned and who should be put in jail for it is wrong. So there's an example of a feminist in Norway, for example, who could face a prison sentence for 3 years because she articulated the view that a woman is a female adult. And some people would see the sentence that a woman is a female adult as hate speech. And, this particular bill didn't give a definition to gender identity. It didn't actually give a definition to hate as well. So it leaves those two questions wide open for people's interpretation in the future on it. And also, it also allows for the Gardaí to be able to go into people's homes and search for material that's actually not being communicated to anybody else.
Part of the legislation is that the Gardaí enter your home with a warrant and ask you to open your devices, i.e. your PIN numbers or passwords, and you refuse to do so, you can go to jail for 12 months.
Yeah, so this even veers into the space of thought crimes. So in other words, this is not about me calling anybody a name. This is about an individual who is actually maybe going through ideas in their own private space, not communicating with anybody else.
And the law, and just to clarify that, for people don't understand that, the law basically states that if you have something, for example, on your mobile phone or on your laptop, which could be considered to be hate speech, even if you haven't posted it, it's up to you to prove that you weren't going to post it. It's not up to the state to prove that you were. In other words, the person shall be presumed until the contrary is proved to have been in possession of the material in contravention of the subsection. So in other words, if you have something that may be considered to be hate speech on your computer or on your phone, and even if you've never used it, you can still be fined or charged, which is bizarre.
And it's absolutely bizarre. And the key issue here as well, the free speech is not the causes of tensions in society. Free speech is actually the resolving, the relief of tensions in a society. The biggest dangers, I believe, that happens in a society is if people can't articulate freely very strongly held views in a respectful manner, if they're forced to push their language underground or not to articulate it, that actually creates stresses and strains in a democracy and creates far less trust in the structures of society. And I think the government are making a big mistake here. We just ended one set of blasphemy laws a couple of years ago.
To be replaced with another set.
And they're introducing another set of blasphemy laws. And it's just a different type of blasphemy crime they're introducing.
Well, it's just a different minority that's being protected, isn't it, really?
Exactly. So we want to have people engaged in decent, respectful debate. But as Voltaire very clearly states, we need to protect people's ability to say things even when you disagree with them. And
by the way, just for people who are listening, when do we expect those laws to be actually signed in by the President?
Well, they're to go through the Shanads, and from the government's actions this week, I wouldn't be surprised if they get through the Shanads before the summer recess, which is in July. So sometime around September, there could actually be laws. Like, to be honest, many people, even people who had some support for the bill but had a little bit of problems with the bill, honestly felt that the government were going to go back to the drawing board, at least with chunks of this, and rewrite it. So I think people were caught by surprise that the government decided just to go, all in relation to the bill as it stood, because it's a really poorly written bill, and
by the way, sorry to interrupt you, but does the bill apply to the social media platforms, the giants themselves? In other words, not just to the individuals. So will this bill apply to Twitter? And because there is suggestions in Germany, for example, that there are test cases being taken against Twitter in relation to things that were said that might have been anti-Semitic, and the suggestion is that if all of those fines were proven in this particular test case, Twitter could end up with a bill of 50 billion, which is ridiculous. It's probably not going to ever happen. But I mean, so does this bill apply to organisations, corporates? Does it apply to everyone?
My understanding is that it does.
That would be difficult to enforce, wouldn't it?
It may be difficult to enforce, but a lot of this is coming through the European Union as well. So the European Union is a bloc of significant size and would be able to clip the ears of the likes of Twitter in terms of large fines in the future. And also, these companies will have to start, they will have lawyers who will start to advise their boards that they have to go in certain directions as a result of these laws. And that's a difficulty. There is like the problem in our society at the moment is that there are intellectual fashions which gain traction very, very quickly. And if you don't have an opposition, if you don't challenge those issues, if you don't push back, you have a big swing in ideology very, very quickly, and that can lead to a very unstable society. A really healthy democracy is a democracy where everything is tested and challenged to the nth degree, and then where then the citizens can actually identify what is the strongest arguments being put out there, and then vote for those strong arguments to be made into law. But if the government is going to start cutting and damaging people's ability to have these conversations, well, there's going to be danger. Like a number of months ago, there was the Joe Duffy show, which
of course, yes.
Offers an opportunity for real people to phone in and talk about real issues. A large number of women rang the show. They spoke very strongly about the need for safe spaces for women, for the need for women to be able to play sports that are women-only sports, that we shouldn't be getting rid of the words a woman from legislation, that the likes of the HSE shouldn't be talking about chest feeders or people with cervixes, that we shouldn't have schools getting rid of the words mother or father or boys and girls in class because that's not deemed inclusive, and these are real people having the discussions that everybody else is having in the country.
And of course, RTE was silenced and brought before the they were requested to be brought before the Oireachtas.
RTE was basically silenced, and their knuckles were wrapped, and that's the big danger in society at the moment. And unfortunately, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and Sinn Féin, Labour, these are completely bought and sold political parties in terms of this agenda.
Do you, by the way, Peadar, I'm assuming you speak to other politicians in the hallways. Obviously Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Labour and Sinn Féin all voted in favour of this. Do you believe that there was politicians, or a vast amount of politicians within those parties, that would have voted against it if they hadn't feared losing the whip?
I think that most of those political parties would have had, let's say, 3 different groups in them. So each party would have had a group in favour of this. I would say that the biggest group in each party is people who didn't know anything about it. Easily say that up to 50 or 60% of Fianna Fáil TDs, Fine Gael and Sinn Féin TDs will have no idea really
probably never even read the legislation.
Wouldn't have read the legislation. Simply, wouldn't even have known that this bill was coming up on the day, and would just have followed their whip and voted.
That's crazy. What a way to run a democracy. Because we did speak to a Fianna Fáil candidate last night, and I just happened to throw the question at the end before we spoke to Michael Bellinger from the United States, who is an author and writes for the New York Post as well, as far as I know. And he has written an article about Ireland and these, what he calls Orwellian laws. And, I asked her, would she have voted in favour of it? And she was kind of defending the legislation to a degree and talking about the fact that we can't all be abusing each other, including politicians online. And then Theresa McInerney, and then she turned around to me and I said, have you read the legislation? And she went, no, I haven't seen it yet.
See, and this is the big difficulty. In Leinster House on a weekly basis, the majority of TDs do not read the legislation. They do not know what the legislation means. They simply follow the whip of their political party. And this bill, in fairness to it, was couched in wonderful marketing because, nobody likes hate. Nobody wants to see hateful speech, etc. And the language in which it was couched in, makes it, harder for people to stand up against it, especially if they don't really have a strong conviction or they don't know much about it. And in Sinn Féin, there's no doubt, there would be a number of politicians have major difficulties. Remember, Sinn Féin was against Section 31. This is where the Irish government banned Republicans from speaking on television and radio.
I was only thinking about that last night. You would imagine they would be the one party that would be against being silenced.
Exactly. So one of the reasons I joined that party in the 90s was because the whole idea of censorship was abhorrent to me at that time, and yet we have the same party who railed against censorship in the 80s, now voting for a level of censorship. Now, the other point I would say is there is a rake of TDs in those political parties who don't agree with this. But, many of them just don't have the backbone to stand up against it. I do think that in some of the parties, because of what I would call these parties are pushing, that this agenda has been overreached now significantly. I do think we're starting to see some pushback in relation to this. And I know from Fine Gael, for example, that they're getting a lot of phone calls from people, on the street in terms
Mind you,
of...
listening to what Leo Varadkar said today, it doesn't seem to be bothering them because, according to Leo today, public consultation seems to be pointless because they're not even listening to the public. And in fairness to Ben Scallon from Grip Media, I haven't seen any of the journalists in Ireland going to the trouble of actually going through whatever it was, 3,000 submissions to find that 70% of those submissions said they objected to it. No other journalist has done that in the country. So, in fairness to Grip Media, they do ask the right questions. And Leo was stumped, basically saying that, well, it doesn't matter what people say, we're still going to do it anyway. That's more or less what he said.
Yeah, listen, I think Grips are a breath of fresh air at the moment. If you look at other countries, there's a left-wing media, there's a right-wing media, there's a media in the centre, there's a liberal, there's a conservative media, but Ireland doesn't have that. In the main, outside a few good organisations such as our own, most media are planted firmly on the same political space, and that's the major difficulty, because in political terms, politicians only exist because of the oxygen that they're given via the media. So if you have a political point of view that's counter to the media perspective of it, you won't get the traction for your views, and as a result, it'll be harder for you to grow and harder for you to communicate with potential voters in the future. So, a good, healthy democracy would actually have a diverse media, and it's interesting that many in these political groups talk about diversity and they talk about the need for inclusivity, and if you actually mine down to what their real views are, it's like, you can have any view in the world as long as it agrees with theirs.
Absolutely.
And that's the key element, that's the key problem.
But that seems to be the case here at the moment anyway. But listen, Peadar, thank you very much indeed. And I appreciate you coming on the air and talking to us tonight.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.